Hey folks, this is Rhykker with the Diablo 3 patch 2.6.1 Wizard Build Guide. This video will be all about the DMO set, the Delsere's Magnum Opus, but will also offer a starter wizard build that is independent of gear. And in Season 14, with DMO being the starter set, we'll tell you how to change your skills as you gear up, as you go through your season journey, getting your Haedrig's gift to get your full free set. Now, Meteor builds are all the rage for wizards these days, and DMO is kind of left in the dust, but DMO is still a very, very strong build, and arguably is a lot easier to play. So in this video, we'll give a refresher course on running a Frozen Orb DMO wizard for Greater Rift pushing. We'll also present a faster, speedier variant. That's when you'll want to be running Speed T13 Rifts. And again, we'll wrap up with a gear-independent wizard build. So we'll start with our quick refresher course. If you want more details, I encourage you to check out our old video. But the DMO set makes it so that every time you cast certain spells, you reduce the cooldown on slow time. This set is all about those slow time bubbles. Then the 4-piece bonus, as long as you have slow time active, you're taking a lot less damage. For that reason, you want to ensure you always have at least one slow time bubble, and you don't have to be standing inside of it. And then for the 6-piece bonus, enemies that are inside your bubbles and for 5 seconds after stepping out of them will take a lot more damage from certain skills, and in our case here, we're focusing on Arcane Orb. Now, because this will be an Arcane Orb build, we need the Unstable Scepter huge damage buff. We'll also want a Triumvirate. This will give us a huge damage buff to our Arcane Orb, and to maximize this, we'll want to attack 3 times with a generator to build up our 3 stacks. Now, the thing about the Triumvirate is that you'll want to be casting a signature spell. I was previously calling it a generator. The wizard doesn't have a generator, it just has free spells, signature spells. And you'll want to cast these, again, once every minimum of 6 seconds. Because once you have your 3 stacks, you just have to cast it once every 3 seconds in order to keep all 3 stacks topped off. That said, you'll find that your rate limiting factor here will be more your cooldown reduction generation on slow time. So you'll likely be casting your signature spell more often than once every 6 seconds. Now we're taking a Witching Hour just to maximize our damage here. Now if you want, instead you can go with a belt called the Shame of Delsere that turns your signature spells into a generator, but if you really want to max out your damage, Witching Hour is the way to go. We'll be taking Strong Arm Bracers to deal additional damage to certain crowd-controlled enemies that'll couple well with a skill that we'll be taking. We'll be taking the Traveler's Pledge and Compass Rose to squeeze out some more damage when we're standing still, Toughness when we're running around, a Convention of Elements to squeeze out that much more damage during our cold rotation, and in our cube we're taking an Orb of Infinite Depth, though to be fair, whether you equip the Orb of Infinite Depth or the Triumvirate, it depends entirely on which rolls better for you. They are interchangeable. This will pair with Explosive Blast to give us more toughness and more damage. We're opting for the Illusory Boots because for the pushing variant, we are not going with Teleport. So the ability to pass through enemies will be very important. We need some form of mobility. And then we're taking the Halo of Karini as another massive damage reduction buff. Onto our skills, we're taking Slow Time, Stretch Time. Now it's laying down these slow time bubbles that will be keeping us alive. Enemies inside the bubble are highly slowed down, and their projectiles, like those spears being thrown by the damn goatmen, practically come to a halt. So this in and of itself is a huge way of mitigating damage. Then we're taking the Stretch Time rune to increase our attack speed so that we can squeeze out that many more Frozen Orbs, and thus that much more damage. Now we'll talk a little bit more about attack speed once we get to gearing. If you want to get really finicky, this build does have some breakpoints when it comes to attack speed and maximizing your damage output. Now our main damage dealer, Arcane Orb, Frozen Orb. We want to be dumping as many Frozen Orbs as possible during our cold rotation on our convention. We're going with Explosive Blast, Chain Reaction in order to pair with our Orb of Infinite Depth. This will allow us to rapidly build up our stacks. We're going with Storm Armor to pair with our Halo of Karini for that damage reduction, and Power of the Storm for that resource cost reduction. That allows us to throw out more Arcane Orbs. Now we're going with Black Hole Spell Steal. This is to trigger our Strong Arm Bracers in our big engagements. Now ideally, we want to group up as many enemies as possible with Black Hole Spell Steal because they give us a damage boost for every additional enemy. And then lastly, we're taking Shock Pulse, Piercing Orb, as our signature spell. For our passives, we're taking Unstable Anomaly for an extra life. We're taking Power Hungry because we will ideally want to keep enemies at range, as far away as possible, at the far range of our Frozen Orb. We're taking Unwavering Will because when we're dealing our damage, we'll be standing still. This will pair well with our Compass Rose and Traveler's Pledge combo. And then lastly, we're taking Elemental Exposure. We're able to build up 4 stacks of damage buffs, as long as we can cast spells of different elemental damage types. So we have Lightning covered with Shock Pulse, Cold covered with Frozen Orb, Fire covered with Explosive Blast, and Arcane covered with Black Hole. Alright, now let's look at the gear. I'll drop a link in the video description to the D3 planner that shows idealized stats on every piece of gear. That's a simple way of dealing with this, but if you want a more complex, nuanced answer, in order to determine our optimal stats, we have to factor in attack speed, resource cost reduction, and maximum arcane power. Now at a cost of 30 arcane power a pop, Arcane Orb is pretty costly of a spell. We're seeking to maximize the amount of damage we deal during our cold rotation. We want, during our cold rotation, to be doing nothing but spamming Frozen Orbs. So we need to manage our resource management such that we are able to, for 4 full seconds, spam Frozen Orb, without having to pause, without having to spam a generator or a signature spell. Now, the higher our attack speed, the faster we burn through resource. But if we get enough resource cost reduction, then we can squeeze in an additional Frozen Orb. So basically, there's 2 things that we want to avoid. We want to avoid running out of resource before the 4 seconds are done, and we also want to avoid a scenario where our 4-second window ends and we have enough resource for another Frozen Orb. Now, depending on the exact attack speed, the exact resource cost reduction, and the exact maximum arcane power you get, you might have to tinker around to find the perfect balance. Remember that you can hire the Enchantress to give yourself a 3% attack speed buff, and that you can also put some of your Paragon points into maximum arcane power. Otherwise, you want to max out your move speed and then dump everything into intelligence. For offense, you'll want that attack speed, crit chance, crit damage, finally cooldown reduction. For defense, life, armor, all resist life regen. And for utility, resource cost reduction, area damage, life per hit. The attack speed is another reason that we're going for the Witching Hour, ideally, over the Shame of Delsere. Now, a little note on the attack speed breakpoints. These are basically attack speed thresholds that will translate into a significant jump in damage output. Because basically, if your attack speed goes above a certain breakpoint without reaching the next breakpoint, then there's no point in having that additional attack speed. So the minimum breakpoint you're going to want to go for is 1.82 attacks per second. And in this particular variant, remember that you want to factor in having your time bubble activated. So lay down your time bubble and see the jump that you have in your attacks per second. The other breakpoints to aim for would be 1.88, 1.94, and 2.0. Now, the gems you'll want include the Bane of the Trapped for a massive damage buff, Zay's Stone of Vengeance, which makes you deal more damage the further you are away from enemies, and again, we want to keep enemies far away. And lastly, for Greater Rift Pushing, a Bane of the Stricken, but for easier content, if you're not taking too long to kill the Rift Guardian, you can go with a Bane of the Powerful. Now, we'll very quickly cover the changes to turn this into a speedier build. We're going to lose the Strong Arm Bracers and swap out for Nemesis Bracers. We'll spawn more Elites and Champions, thus we'll clear faster. We're going to swap out our Bane of the Stricken for a Boon of the Hoarder. You want it to be minimum level 25, this will make us move faster and it'll make us drop gold. We're going to want to pair that with a Gold Wrap. That will boost our armor every time we pick up gold, and that also gets combined with an Avarice Band. That'll be replacing our Convention of Elements. Between the Convention and the Halo of Carini, it doesn't matter which you equip, you just want to equip the better one. Same story with the Avarice Band and the Halo of Carini. The Avarice Band will make you pick up gold the more you pick up gold, and it's really the Avarice Band plus Boon of the Hoarder plus Gold Wrap trifecta that define the T13 speedrunning meta. Now, we don't need the added damage reduction or damage granted by the Orb of Infinite Depth, so we're going to swap out for an Aether Walker. This will give us a lot more mobility, and because we'll be using a teleport skill, we don't need the Illusory Boots anymore, so we're going to go with the Shame of Delsere. This will help us recover arcane power, especially now that we're using teleport that's going to cost us AP. Looking at the skills here, we're not going to use Black Hole anymore, which we're using to boost our damage and trigger our Strong Arm Bracers. We don't need all that extra damage, instead we're going for teleport. We'll likely be teleporting at least once every 5 seconds, so we'll always be taking 25% less damage. And we're swapping out Explosive Explosive Blast for magic weapon, Conduit for more arcane power management and just more damage. For our passives, we're swapping out Elemental Exposure for Astral Presence, again, more generation. And if you wanted to, you can likely swap out Unstable Anomaly for Glass Cannon. Alright, we'll quickly go over a build for a fresh level 70 character with no gear. We'll take Disintegrate Chaos Nexus as our main attack skill. Disintegrate deals more damage the longer we channel it, meaning we'll have to sit in place for a little while and enemies will run up to us. That's where Chaos Nexus kicks in to deal with them. We'll take Hydra, Lightning Hydra to squeeze out a bit more damage. We'll take Magic Weapon, Force Weapon to give us a 20% damage buff. We'll take Familiar Arcanaut for more resource generation because Disintegrate will be chewing through it. We'll take Energy Armor, Prismatic Armor for a nice toughness buff. And we'll take Teleport Wormhole for great mobility. So basically we have 3 passive buffs here, plus a movement ability. When we engage an enemy, we're gonna lay down our Hydra and then it's Disintegrate. You just hold it down, twirl around, kill everything around you. For passives, Glass Cannon will bump up our damage. Blur will offset the effect of Glass Cannon by making us take less damage. Audacity will deal more damage to the enemies that are creeping up next to us. We really want to deal with those before they hurt us too badly. And Unwavering will, again, we're standing still a lot, so this combines well. Now, once you got the 2-piece bonus of the DMO set, you're probably not going to change the build. The 2-piece bonus just lets you cast Slow Time more often, provided you attack with certain skills. We would have to change the build up a lot for something that doesn't give us that big of a benefit. The real benefit of the DMO set, of having those slow times, is really the enhanced effects that come with the later set bonuses. That said, if you feel you're taking too much damage and need added toughness, you can swap out Glass Cannon for Galvanizing Ward. Once you get the 4-piece bonus, that's when you want to start working Slow Time into your rotation. 60% damage reduction, that's significant. So we're actually going to sacrifice Energy Armor and the defensive buff that it gives us for the much larger damage reduction granted by Slow Time thanks to the 4-piece DMO bonus. We'll further grab the Exhaustion rune on Slow Time to even more than make up for the loss of your Energy Armor. That said, if you really want the added toughness buff from Energy Armor, you could instead lose Magic Weapon. Now, as you're pushing higher, enemies are going to have more hit points. They're not going to die as quickly, so you're going to benefit from switching from Lightning Hydra to Mammoth Hydra, which deals damage over time. Enemies will also be dealing more damage, so we're going to swap from Wormhole on Teleport to Safe Passage for more damage reduction. Now, you might feel like you'll want to swap out your Familiar, which is being used to generate resource, to instead get one of the spells that will be resetting the cooldown on our slow time. Something like Shock Pulse, Piercing Orb. Now, doing your Greater Rift 20 with this setup will be a little tricky. Delsere's 4-piece gives you basically no form of damage increase. So if you happen to find any items that buff the damage of any skills, do be sure to work those into your build somehow. And then once you get your 6 pieces of DMO, you can work towards one of the pushing your speed builds. And that's going to wrap up this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts on what wizard build you'd like to play this season. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can pledge on Patreon, where your support is immensely appreciated. As backer rewards, we have monthly virtual hangouts, we've got some behind the scenes stuff, and more. We're trying to reach 300 Patreon supporters, even $1 helps. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more Diablo content.